What happens when a man in a wheelchair returns to face the lion he once saved, only to be told the animal forgot him? The moment that followed left an entire reserve speechless. They said I was crazy. Well, not to my face, of course. That would have taken guts. But you could hear it in their polite chuckles and the way they looked at me like I'd dropped my brain somewhere between Texas and Zimbabwe. I wasn't there for a safari or some soul-searching midlife crisis. I was 26, sunburned, exhausted, and dead set on saving anything with a heartbeat, especially those the system had written off. And that morning, I stumbled right into him. A young lion, trapped, twisted paw, cracked ribs, left eye swollen shut. He was wedged between two collapsed branches like a forgotten suitcase at an airport no one bothered to visit. He didn't growl, didn't roar. He looked at me, calm, like he knew something I didn't. I could hear my heartbeat loud enough to drown out the buzzing flies. "You sure?" the local ranger asked. "We got orders. He's marked. Dangerous, no rescue, no rehab." Translation: it's easier to label something a threat than admit we failed it. I crouched anyway, pulled my scarf down, looked that lion in the eye and said, "Not today." That was my first mistake, and probably the only one I don't regret. I called him Tamu. It means hope in Swahili. Fitting, since hope was the only thing keeping either of us upright. I cleaned his wounds, stitched what I could with trembling hands, and spent 3 days beside him in a busted tent that barely stood against the wind. I fed him from a baby bottle like he was a house cat. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. People came to watch. Not to help, of course. Oh, no. Just to whisper things like, "He's gonna get himself killed," or "That lion will rip him in half when he's stronger." Helpful commentary from the peanut gallery. But the worst came later. Apparently, saving a lion isn't as heroic as it sounds when there's money involved. See, that particular part of the savannah? It was being prepped for controlled hunting experiences, code for wealthy men shooting half-blind animals from jeeps. And my little rescue mission? It threw off their business calendar. A board of grinning businessmen in linen shirts and cowboy hats sat me down like I was a child who'd colored outside the lines. "You've humanized him," one of them said, sipping imported scotch. "That's dangerous. He's not a pet, son." And I thought, no, he's not a pet. But he's not target practice either. Next thing I knew, my grant was revoked, my visa under review. They told me I'd overstepped, that I'd jeopardized the safety of the reserve. The paperwork didn't say, "You embarrassed us." But that was the gist. I was escorted to the airport like I'd tried to smuggle out diamonds. And Tamu? He was locked away in a remote reserve. 0 visitors, 0 press, 0 chance of me seeing him again. And then, as if the universe wanted to send one last punch, I was back home for barely a month when the accident happened. A careless driver, a crumpled car, and just like that, my spine gave up. I woke up in a hospital bed with a doctor saying things like wheelchair-bound and adjust your expectations, which, by the way, is a very polite way of saying life's about to suck. But here's the kicker. Even through the haze of meds and rage and silence, I kept thinking about that lion, not about what I did for him, but how he looked at me. Like he knew I wasn't just fixing him, I was trying to fix myself. What happened next changed everything, and trust me, you don't want to miss how it all unraveled. Let me tell you something real. Time doesn't heal everything. Sometimes it just gets better at pretending it doesn't hurt. 5 years. That's how long it had been since I was wheeled out of Zimbabwe like a piece of lost luggage with a "Do Not Return" sticker slapped across my life. 5 years of rehab centers, lawyers who talked in circles, and friends who said things like, "At least you're alive," as if that was supposed to be comforting. I smiled. I nodded. And I spent every night thinking about a lion in a cage on the other side of the world. His name was Tamu. And for 5 long years, I didn't know if he was alive, sedated, relocated, or used as a damn tax write-off. I wrote letters, I made calls. I even started a YouTube channel hoping someone, anyone, would listen. Most people just liked the thumbnail and kept scrolling. Cute lion, sad guy in a wheelchair. Next video, please. But the internet has a funny way of putting the right eyes on the right pain. It started with a comment, then a message, then a shaky video from a student in Zimbabwe who whispered into her phone like she was filming a crime scene. He's here, in a back sector. They don't let people in, but he's different. He doesn't act like the others. My heart didn't pound. It roared. It shook something loose inside me that had been nailed shut. I booked a flight the next day. Wheelchair, camera crew, translator, and a firm promise from my physical therapist that if I fell off another dirt trail, she wasn't patching me up again. We landed to heat that wrapped around you like a punishment. My body screamed at every bump, every pothole. And when we rolled up to the reserve's main gate, the guard barely glanced at my documents before barking, "Turn around!" "No," I said. "I'm not here to hunt. I'm here to see what you locked away." "Exactly," he replied, stone-faced. "We locked it away for a reason." You know what they really mean when they say security? They mean, we don't want your camera, we don't want your story, and we especially don't want your proof. The next 20 minutes were a blur of denied access, thin smiles, and a big man in a white polo shirt who strutted out like he was running a country club. I recognized him. One of the original board members, same guy who sipped scotch while telling me Tamu was just a wild animal. Nothing personal. "Back again?" he smirked. "You never learn, do you?" "Apparently not," I said. "But I don't quit either." He leaned in real close. We moved on. So did the lion. I could have swallowed that. Could have packed up and gone home with another video that would get 30 likes and a few pity comments. But then, it happened. A sound ripped across the reserve like thunder being torn apart. It wasn't wind. It wasn't echo. It was a roar. Low, guttural, and so familiar I could feel my stomach twist. Everyone stopped. Even the big guy in the polo turned toward the tree line like he'd seen a ghost. "That's not possible," one of the guards muttered. But I knew that sound. I'd heard it in a nightmare, in a tent 5 years ago, when a broken lion found his voice for the first time. That was no coincidence. That was a call, and it was meant for me. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for. It's right here. Stick around to see how the hero flips the whole script. You don't forget a sound like that. That roar? It didn't just rattle the trees. It cracked something open in me that I didn't even know was still alive. Everyone froze. The guards, the smug polo-shirted executive, even the camera crew. Silent. You could have heard a feather hit the dirt. That's how loud the silence got when something real interrupted their polished script. I turned toward the direction it came from. There was a section of the fence, not for tourists, not even marked on any official map, just bare steel, rust in places, and a patch of open dirt like something heavy had been pacing it for years. And then he appeared. He didn't sprint. He didn't roar again. Tamu walked out slow like he knew the show had already started, and every eye was on him. He was bigger, of course, scarred. But I recognized that stride, the slight tilt in his gait, and that look. The one that made you feel like he saw something in you you'd forgotten was there. He walked right up to the fence, stopped, and stared at me. And for one wild second, nobody moved. Not the armed guards, not the executives, not me. Just a man in a wheelchair and a lion separated by rusted steel and 5 years of silence. I wheeled forward. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I lifted my hand and laid it flat against the metal. Tamu stepped closer. His breath hit the fence. His eyes didn't shift. He didn't flinch. And then, slowly, deliberately, he pressed his forehead against the wire. Not a snarl, not a growl, a connection. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Seconds? Minutes? Doesn't matter. It was the kind of moment that makes the world shut up. The guards lowered their rifles. The student behind me, the one who'd risked her internship to get me in, started crying. The camera caught all of it. Not that I cared. That moment wasn't for YouTube. It was for him. And for me. When Tamu stepped back, he didn't pace. Didn't turn to leave. He just watched. Like he was making sure I saw what he'd become. Not a threat. Not a trophy. A survivor. And that's when the real noise started. By the time we got back to the hotel, the video had already hit 300,000 views. By morning, it passed 5 million. People didn't just share it. They clung to it. Comments flooded in. That lion remembered him. You can't fake that kind of trust. This should be shown in every school. And suddenly, the people who'd shut the door in my face were scrambling for statements. The reserve launched an educational wildlife initiative overnight, branding Tamu as a symbol of resilience and unity. Right? The same lion they locked away like a secret. Now they wanted him on banners. I didn't care. Let them spin it, let the suits scramble. Because I saw what mattered. A lion remembered a man in a wheelchair. And in that look, he gave me something no doctor, no court, no apology ever could. Dignity. Not the kind you fight for in boardrooms. The kind you earn by showing up, broken or not, and doing what's right even when the world calls you a fool for it. So yeah, maybe I can't run anymore. But I've never stood taller.